trying to fit within that 65 to 60% overhead to collections is not a difficult thing to do.
Welcome to AMC. I'm Dr. Greg Miller. We're in a series on practice stats, and today we're going to cover the topic managing overhead with John McGuire. Let's get started.
Hi, my name's John McGuire, and I'm going to spend a little time today talking about income to operating overhead. And this is an extremely important part of every practice, or in fact of every business that you may operate or be part of. One of the key things before we even get any further into this is to make sure that you completely understand the financials of your business. In other words, you have to be certain that you have a very good profit and loss statement and balance sheet, and all your accounting balances and is accurate. These are very important things when you're generating reports and utilizing information in planning, and to really, if you're going to get a very accurate income to debt ratio and overhead, it's going to rely upon a great number of things, and that's accurate and good financials. So that's going to be key to this. And there's a lot of ways to do that. You can whether have good staff or you use outside parties. Either way, take a look at the options and make sure that you're getting things that are credible and done appropriately, so that there's no issues when you're looking at these statements, to identify areas of need or problems or improvements, as well as when you work on budgets and other things of that nature. So it's important when you look at your income. That could be any service, such as chiropractic care. It could be nutrition. It could be a host of things that makes up your entire income line. That most of you understand, which I'm certain. But when you really start to look at your overhead, and that overhead can be an abundance of different things. It could be your administrative costs. It could be your operating costs, such as equipment leases for x-rays, for tables or other service equipment that you utilize. And then, of course, you have staff, salaries, rent, utilities, a whole host of items that could make up your day-to-day operations. Now, some of the clinics may vary. Some may have small amount of items, some may have a large amount. It could have a lot to do with the size of the practice, the amount of total income and collections, as well as the different services and treatments that you may have available. So let's kind of go ahead and start and kind of run through some of the basics on what you should be looking for. When you're through for the end of the month, and let's use January as an example. In the month of January, you look at your total collections for that month. That's your total revenue. That's your total income. You can carry it either way. But when you really start to look at your overhead, which makes up all of your administrative, payroll, staff, equipment, rent, all of that, everything combined, the national average indicates that chiropractic is somewhere, believe it or not, in a 75%. So that means all of your expenses is about 75% of your total collections, or in this case, your income or your revenue. And that may seem kind of high. In fact, it's pretty high for me to what I've seen in different businesses. But it's a relatively average standpoint across the board for chiropractic. Now, really where you should be is, in my opinion, your overhead should be somewhere around 65 to 60%. It should fall within the lower 60 percentile. And a lot of things that you can do in order to get to that area is, one, watch your expenses. And then at the same time, what expenses do you have in there that can be removed or reduced, and so on. So, trying to fit within that 65 to 60% overhead to collections is not a difficult thing to do. Now, some of you chiropractors are using payroll in there for yourself, which I think is an important thing, because as an owner of the practice, you should be taking a salary plus an owner's draw. Okay, and the nice aspect of that is the owner's draw won't show up in your overhead. That's on your balance sheet, which helps reduce the overhead percentage and so forth. You want to make sure that you have ample staff, but not too much staff. There's been many times where I've seen chiropractors who have staff of 3, but really only need 2. And you really should base that portion on your number of patient visits per month. And if you're staffed with 2 and you increase about 100 new patient visits a week, that's probably the threshold where you want to start to look towards adding another CA. You want to keep your rent costs down, your administrative costs down. You want to try and manage your equipment costs. All these things should meet certain areas or certain percentages and certain averages that should be within chiropractic clinics. Now, the one area that we've seen that can really hurt and change your overhead percentage is your marketing costs. I've seen in many occasions where the marketing costs could be as high as 10 to 20% of your collections. Well, the rule of thumb here is with any chiropractic clinic is that your marketing spend each month should be based on what your collections are. It should really never be a fixed amount. So in other words, your collections aren't the same every month. So your marketing spend should be a percentage of whatever your collections are. And that average is pretty close to 2 to 3%, not 10 or 15%, which a lot of chiropractors do because they believe that they need marketing in order to survive. A lot of chiropractors spend a great deal of dollars on marketing overhead and a variety of different marketing schemes because they're solely relied upon the fact that new patients have to come in all the time rather than maintaining and keeping those patients for a very long time. That makes your cost of acquisition way cheaper, it makes your overhead way cheaper, and helps you put it in that category of that 60 to 65%. So marketing is a very key thing that can be easily manipulated or changed to help your practice, but at the same time keep your overhead low. You know, there's also travel expenditures. While it's important to get CE, maybe travel for a variety of other special professional reasons, you want to kind of watch your travel to where you're meeting certain guidelines and you're managing your threshold each month in order to be at the percentage that's required for overhead. And as a doctor owner, one of your portions of your salary is your net profit. So when you take all of your collections minus all of your overhead, that net profit on the end pays you your owner's draw, that portion that we spoke about earlier in this conversation and how you should be structured with the salary and owner's draw. So you should be very mindful of your overhead and looking at every single expenditure, such as copy paper and all these different administrative things. You could also provide your staff salaries that are average salaries or maybe even slightly below average, but have incentives that are based on profit or collections or maintaining overhead. And that way it creates more of a win model for you, and it helps keep the overhead down as well. So when you really look at your financials and go through each line item within your overhead and your total administration costs, you should be able to find ways to tweak a little bit of each and every one of those that makes sense. As long as you're smart about it and work through each and every category, and you get to the point where you're close to that 60 percentile, you'll realize that you're bringing home more money, things are operating just fine, and that you can have a much greater successful practice. So when you grow, you can still maintain those costs, but have more profit and more collections without adjusting those and keeping the same overhead percentage. So be sure at the very beginning that you have accurate financials. Make sure that your collections are in there appropriately and the services that are in there appropriately for your total revenue. But more importantly, look at every single line item within your total operating expenses, your administrative and all your costs involved with that. Look at each one of those items, make adjustments, look at your staff, figure out how to adjust their income where there's some incentives and not just a high flat fee. Also look at your marketing costs. Those areas are key. Then travel and other underlying administrative costs. Look line by line, take advantage of adjusting those, finding solutions, an easy way to adjust those, and you'll see that your overhead will be in the right percentage and your net income will be higher, then bringing you more money home. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I appreciate this.
Thanks for joining us today. As a reminder, we've got regular webinars that go into even more detail on this topic. Check the description for more ways to get our content and sign up. If you'd like more information about AMC and how it might help your practice, you can always reach out to us at amcfamily.com.